out into the world. Drugs opened up a new way of life. I listened to the Grateful Dead on records, panhandled for my food, hung out under bridges getting high, hitchhiked with friends, and traveled wherever the road took me. Drugs helped me explore unfamiliar feelings that I wasn't used to, and I started to learn to love myself and the world for the first time. Drugs, of course, caused all sorts of problems that I didn't and wouldn't accept for a very long time. Marijuana turned into meth into heroin, and worse yet, I now had another addiction. I became addicted to criminal activity, to the chase, to the adrenaline rush of committing crimes and not getting caught. I then became a regular at the Denver County Jail out in Colorado. I spent years in and out of jail and on the run. And in the middle of it all, I got pregnant. I was 26 years old. I stopped doing drugs before my son was born, and I was able to turn my life around, and I was able to be open and honest about my former life. Wanting a better life than the drugs was refreshing. 7 years sober, a single mom to a son and a daughter, and I moved now to Iowa. And though I'd quit drugs on my own without treatment, changed my friends, and maintained sobriety, I really didn't understand relapse. I just managed to avoid the drugs. I ended up relapsing for 6 months after maintaining my sobriety for 7 years. I honestly am not completely sure why. Things were good. I had a house and a job, and my 2 kids and I were building a life. I guess I thought I could control it. Just one time. I thought it was in front of me for the first time in 7 years, and I didn't say no. I talk about my first relapse like this. I saw the lions at the end of my gate, like 2 concrete statues on either side, and then I freely let them walk in. I thought I could control them. I thought I could put them back after I was done. In those 6 months, I tried to balance and control the drugs and raise my 2 children. I had gone from wanting to party one time to I was in trouble. And in a moment, one weekend, with the lies that the drugs told me, I thought life had gotten too unmanageable and too hard. DHS and my parents got involved, and my world got turned upside down. The loss of my 2 kids and battling the courts and DHS was devastating. The termination hearing didn't just leave a scar, it took a part of me. It brought with it a label of shame and judgment that forever held me in a state of sadness and grief. Through it all, I bonded with the one person who had sat alongside me, getting high and helping it all fall. This would eventually be the man that I married. We stopped the drugs, but turned to alcohol because I couldn't manage the pain and loss of my 2 kids. When we drank, our worst sides came out. He would scare me and I'd run and hide. In the morning, when we were sober, everything would be all right. I really didn't see this as a warning sign because he hadn't actually laid hands on me. Plus, it only happened when we drank. I guess part of me was also getting comfortable in my pain and sorrow, and I was willing to live that way just so I wouldn't have to go through this DHS stuff alone. Every night, I wanted to drink and drown the pain and loss of my kids, but every night brought very little relief, and every morning still came. I kept their pictures on every wall. Their rooms I kept exactly the same. When he and I moved to a house together in Ames, I set each of their rooms back up again. I put every picture back up on the wall. I put their drawings on the fridge, and anything that had the word mom, I put where I could see it. For years, I left it all set up as if they would be back, but they never were. I remember so many great firsts, great memories, but what I don't remember is the first time I became truly scared of him, the first time he drugged me or threw me, the first time our boys tried to get Dad off of me, the first time I lied about my bruises, the first time I avoided family get-togethers so my bruises weren't seen, or the first time someone asked me if I was in an abusive relationship. I was not always in an abusive relationship. In fact, for 8 years of our marriage, we flourished and grew into 2 healthy individuals who thanked God for the changes we had made to get to that point. We'd come through meeting in the world of addiction and found a way to the other side together. We had learned things were good until they weren't. Things were manageable, and I had learned to cope with the loss of my children. Things were manageable until the enemy was behind enemy lines and already past my front door. When you marry, it's for better or for worse. Together, you help one another. Sure, there were always issues, and looking back, there were definite red flags. I even wondered what I would do if he relapsed. After all, it's harder for two addicts to stay sober together. I told him that the one thing that worried me about marrying him was that his anger sometimes scared me. He said he'd never hurt me, and I believed him until I was staring back at an addict. The pills didn't always cause problems. Not at first. It took years. They helped him function, and they were prescribed. Occasionally, we would both take pills for fun. We'd get projects done, stay up for days or a day or two, and then be done. Then he was given a script for 100 Dilaudids every single month. Soon, we had them gone and shot up our veins in about 1 week. Addiction by way of prescription pills now led us down the road that should have led him, if not both of us, into a grave. His come-downs made him violent and moody, lasting for weeks. He'd have weeks of lying in bed, becoming depressed, and not getting up to eat. Then, knowing that he had to wait for his prescription meant faking trips to the ER every month, in and out of the hospital for weeks, even going into the hospital the day after our second son. First weeks home with a newborn and a 2-year-old, and I was spending hours going back and forth between hospital and home just to be there for him. Our family had fallen apart. I was worn out before I began, and God seemed far away. After the hospital trips, he'd return to the bedroom and sink back into depression while waiting for his monthly script. His family knew about his problems with the pain pills, and all eyes were on him. He lost jobs, wrecked a company truck, stopped working altogether, wrecked our family minivan, started having seizures after each auto accident, slurred his speech often, and fell asleep while he was in mid-sentence. The pills changed him. I maintained. I stuffed my feelings. I was just trying to survive it all. I had held everything and everyone together while trying to raise our 2 young boys. I eventually lost my own way and followed behind my husband more and more back into addiction. Why he had a harder time on pills than I did, I do not know. But now I could no longer stand anything about the pills. How it would take him hours to walk across the room, the low ranting and talking to himself he did, and the neuropsychotic episodes that were starting. I couldn't stand the money that was being spent riding or driving in the car with our kids high. Couldn't even stand how they made me feel. But I didn't stop using or shooting them either. Finally, one day, after his many suggestions about bringing meth back into our home, it was there again. Neither of us had touched meth since I had gotten that first DHS case 8 years previously. He was finally out of depression and stopped retreating to sleep for days in the bedroom, and we started doing family things again. For a time, he was shooting the pills and the meth together. That's what should have put him in his grave. He finally got noticed by his doctor for being high, and they took the pills away. So we'd finally gotten him off the pills by using meth, but we both knew the outcome. Meth would take it all. Meth would also cause my husband to finally lay hands on me. But somehow, again, we thought we could control it. I believe that for myself and my husband, that with every relapse, especially after long periods of sobriety, that our brain chemistry changed more dramatically. My husband started becoming physically abusive to me 8 years into our marriage. Long days and nights of overwhelming thoughts plagued him, and he spent days away from his family. I was so lost, and the drugs made me lose my hope and happiness. DHS got involved, and 2 more kids were collateral damage to addiction. It was all one big giant nightmare. It didn't even matter anymore about getting the boys back. My husband had had a dirty UA with his PO, and unless we were both staying clean for DHS, we barely stood a chance. He wasn't even trying, and I'd find drug paraphernalia lying around sometimes moments before DHS arrived. DHS started asking questions about my bruises, and they were getting harder to cover up. I had tried to save my marriage, tried to save my family, and I had to walk away to save my own life. On April 10th, 2018, my husband strangled me and tried to kill me. I had fled to the backyard to a camper and locked myself in and called 911. It was the longest, slowest minutes of my life, and I knew once I called 911 on my husband that I would be walking away from my marriage. In that moment, I had to walk away with only the clothes on my body, leave my marriage and my children behind, and there was no one helping me navigate through any of it. I didn't know what the next 5 minutes would hold. I knew everything would be different now. I know some people don't understand why myself or anyone would stay in an abusive relationship. And that's because there is no understanding. It's deeper than the surface. It's not something comprehensible until you find yourself living it, and even then, it doesn't make sense. It's like I was blind to my own life. It took a single event to separate myself from my mess. After walking away from my husband of almost 10 years and another DHS case where our boys were ultimately taken away, I didn't know what to do. I struggled. I remained sober during the DHS case, but DHS became a losing battle for me. After legally losing the boys, I relapsed instantly and fell back into doing even more drugs than I had done before. My husband was now in and out of jail. When he was out of jail, I was too scared to walk or ride a bike for fear that any one of the cars going by was him. I was afraid to go out after dark. I had no direction whatsoever. I fell into relationships that didn't last and weren't healthy and struggled to get up in the morning. Never did I label myself as being in a domestic violent relationship. I didn't see him as an abuser. I saw him as my partner, someone I needed and someone who needed me. I thought we could fix us and go back to everything before the drugs, that he just needed someone there for him who truly cared for him. He was my husband, and wives don't ever leave their husbands, not for any reason. I hadn't labeled myself with anything up to this point, not even an addict. And I didn't really know what PTSD was, and it didn't occur to me that I had it until one afternoon I heard a baby crying out in the hall of my apartment. And in that one moment, panic and terror overtook me. My chest got tight, and I was not able to breathe or listen to the crying without bursting into tears and falling to the ground. I had neighbors on one side of me who'd fight, and their 5 children would wait in the hall while their mom got thrown around. I could hear it through the walls. I wanted to help. I even tried one time, but I walked away from those kids and went to cry in the corner of my closet, holding my ears, rocking, and talking to myself, trying to stay calm. I had tried to manage on my own, realizing that I saw firsthand how my trauma and the abuse was affecting me. I closed the curtains and patio door in the morning so I couldn't hear the kids or see them getting on the bus. I turned the television up when I thought I'd hear kids in the hall. I wasn't able to watch TV where kids were getting hurt without bursting into tears. I stopped going to the store, stopped eating, didn't work, and avoided public places because in my world, I had to pretend that there were no children anywhere. I had found unhealthy ways to manage my PTSD, and drugs only intensified and prolonged the emotional trauma I wasn't dealing with. I realized I was making my life worse by stuffing the trauma and not dealing with it. I decided that even if my children were separated from me and not in my care, that I'd work myself back to a healthy me and hope that someday maybe I'd see them again. I would put one foot in front of the other, get sober, and start living again, for me and for them. I then had a heart-to-heart with the man upstairs, set my intentions, and set off to do some hard work. My trauma was built on fear and being afraid, so I started to dig deep and search my past, both in my childhood and in how I viewed things through a different lens because of the things that had shaped me. My trauma has shaped me, and I realize I still have work to do. I realized my emotional health and unhealthy situations led me back to drugs after years of sobriety. I learned that I need healthy boundaries and that I have to be healthy on my own again before thinking of being in a relationship, and that when I do, I won't settle for a quick-tempered man. I've learned that drugs destroy lives, and that using drugs played his hand in me losing 4 beautiful children and causing some of my PTSD. I learned that the devil plays hard for me, and demons are real, but that God is greater than any enemy. So I started finding resources in the community to help me. I got on some medication to help with depression and anxiety, and I started getting healthy in mind, body, and spirit. NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, was one of those resources. I started taking classes at NAMI Central Iowa because they were free. I took in-person classes and then Zoom classes as COVID changed the way we lived. I plugged myself into any and all free workshops I could find. I now advocate for Access, which is the domestic violence shelter, and shared my story at one of their fundraisers. I volunteer at the Martha's House of Hope, which is a home for pregnant mothers and their new babies. And I serve in the nursery and the 2 to 5-year-old room at church. The thought of holding a baby brought me so much pain before, and now I love it so much again. So much amazing healing has taken place. I am a speaker and facilitator at NAMI Central Iowa, helping to break down the stigma around mental illness. NAMI continues to be a platform where I speak and share my story. I get to share hope. I am now a certified peer support specialist and a recovery coach, and I am NAMI Central Iowa's Mental Health and Wellness Center Activity Coordinator at our drop-in center in Ames. I help encourage others and help with goal setting. I help teach coping skills based off my own life experiences, and I find activities and programs that help our peers become more empowered. My trauma has shaped me and changed me. I am still learning what the new me looks like. So I look at the world a little differently now. I grab hold of the smaller joys of everyday life. I sit in my garden trying to catch butterflies, and I pet bumblebees. I pick wildflowers so that I can cover my home in things that make me smile. I paint on random feathers I find, and my latest adventure has been actually getting over the fear of spiders. There's always a certain freedom in conquering your own fears. I remind myself that God put our eyes facing forward so we weren't always looking back. My 21-year-old son moved in with me. He was one that was removed from me 13 years ago. My 17-year-old daughter and I are so very close, and my relationship with my parents continues to be healed. I am now legally divorced, and I have a cute little place with my own art studio in it. I never thought I'd see 13 years later that my firstborn would come home, and if I wasn't sober, that opportunity would have been lost. I have not seen my younger boys in more than 4 years. Drugs damage families, and drugs are never God's plan. I look at the world a little differently now. My boys are still with family, and they're being raised in a wonderful Christian home. My in-laws family does not let me or my ex-husband see the boys. I wish things were different, but I am at least grateful that they do not let my ex-husband around them. I want what is best for my boys, and I do genuinely believe that they do too. My in-laws family do allow my folks and my 2 older kids to see my boys regularly. There just aren't any rule books with this stuff. So for now, my boys are safe and so am I. I will wait another 13 years if I have to see the return of them. I do not know if I will reach that place where all my kids are home, but I'm not going to stop living my life as if they aren't. And being sober is my first priority in getting them back home. God has put amazing people and resources in my path, people who support my continued recovery and ongoing work to get through my trauma. Telling my story and sharing my journey has been my own puzzle piece to healing. My story is filled with broken pieces, terrible choices, and some ugly truth. It's also filled with a major comeback, peace in my soul, and a grace that saved my life. Thank you.
Should we play it at the end or should we play it at the beginning? What do you think? It's up to you. It's up to you. Good evening. I'm Tasha. I'm a longtime born and raised resident here from Ames, Iowa. Raised both of my kids. I'm an alum from Ames High, class of 91. My kids are alums from Ames High School. You know, when I get ready to do these things, I've oftentimes planned a script, and I just decided, you know, I just want you guys to feel how real this journey has become to me. Tashara is my eldest child. She was found here in Ames December 17, 2016. She had overdosed from a synthetic opioid called U4 7700. And I specify that is because during that time, when they were seeing a lot of overdoses, they were generalizing what people were actually overdosing from. And I'm a firm believer in being transparent. I think true healing begins when you kind of, not kind of, I feel very vulnerable doing this kind of stuff. But I also believe that through our story and a little portion of Tashara's short journey here on earth, I believe that we can be a part of change in our community and our state. Because even though the state of Iowa is not seeing overdose deaths, maybe that some other larger cities are, it's here, folks. It's here in Ames. I don't have a story of that I spent years and years battling substance use with Tashara. She was an amazing young human being. She was trying to find her way, maneuvering herself through high school, graduating. She lettered in band. We just didn't have the struggles that you'll hear about. And what I want to address, it's non-discriminating. So it's affecting everybody. Overdose does not, if we can do one thing tonight, if you can take one thing away from you tonight, from me, we just need to be a part of the solution and not the problem. So when I ask you to end the stigma, that's really what I mean. The judgment, that's not what we're here for. These people don't set out to become addicts. They really don't, folks. They're trying to coat pain, right? They're trying to numb that pain. We all know what it's like to deal with stressors in life. COVID was another thing that brought us, a lot of stress. And we saw a lot of suicides during that time. And we're still seeing the aftermath of that now. Overdose is another thing. People that weren't even substance users before found themselves up against using alcohol, using some form of substance to coat whatever it is that they're feeling. And so if you can take anything away from me tonight, it's just we need to humanize and show empathy. I know that my family is just one little story of Ames, Iowa. But let me tell you, anyone that passes away from overdose, it's someone's special someone. It's someone's child. It's someone's mother. It's someone's father, grandparents. I mean, this is across the board, you guys. It's affecting people of all socioeconomic backgrounds, all races. And quite frankly, it's going to take these little community conversations to open up people's eyes and ears. And hopefully you hear what April said tonight, what I'm getting ready to tell you. There are some things that I'm going to show you tonight on a slideshow that are probably triggering. So I want to give you an opportunity if you want to step out once we do play the slideshow. But again, my number one priority tonight is be transparent and let you know that this was just a portion of who Tashara was and is. It was tragic. It's still, I call it peeling back my onion. An onion may be fragrant and smell delicious to some people, but some people it's not so pleasant. And there's some things I'm going to talk about that aren't pleasant, and it's meant to ruffle feathers. I decided on December 17, 2016 at Mercy Medical Center, when I had decided that I was going to take Tashara off life support. She fought for her life for a week. She was on dialysis. She was intubated. She went through hypothermia protocol. None of that stuff is very pleasant. She was 25. And when we found out what was going on, and we made our initial journey to the ER here in Ames, sit for a moment and just, can you imagine? I had just talked to her the night before, and can you imagine what it feels like to hear that she was found unresponsive? And even at that time, I was still trying to process, like, what? How, why? Like I just talked to her. And then seeing her, and seeing what state she was in, it was heartbreaking. It's still heartbreaking for me. None of this stuff is going to go away. All these conversations, all the hard work, all the, groups that I have joined, all the fighting in DC to change laws. At the end of the day, folks, none of that's going to bring her back. But what it has done is it's changed me. Prior to this happening, I lived pretty invincible, or I thought I was invincible. And none of us are invincible, folks. Tomorrow's never promised. It should have changed me. Some of that change is very uncomfortable. You have to learn to maneuver yourself at any given time. I call it my surfboard. It's called the grief surfboard. And I can just be sitting at work and something reminds me of her, whether the clock strikes 10:01, her birthday was October 1st. I think about her. I see the color green. I think about her. I look at my son, he was 16, when she was found. And he was the first person that he was told that his sister was found. That's hard. It's hard for me as a parent because my life flashed in front of me that night when she was found. And I had to real quickly put my feelings aside because I had him to take care of. And I had to start making some medical decisions that I didn't want to have to make. I don't sugarcoat things. I'm still pretty angry about the situation. That's still healing for me. That anger that I feel enables me to do what I do up here. There were 2 other young individuals involved in this tragedy, and I do think about them. I'm a parent first and foremost, so I do think about the young lives that were affected that night. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas get me. I still fight those. It's not getting over it. It's more so learning to live within it. And when I was invited to speak tonight, I thought to myself, Tasha, what have you learned over the last 6 years? And I can tell you, on day 1, I didn't think I would be here. I had a plan. I just didn't know when I was going to implement it to end my life. And this is the first time I've publicly admitted that. So it's been hard. It's been really hard. I am very grateful for my community, though. I have to tell you, a lot of the mama warriors and families that have embraced me, that I lock arms with when we do things like this, maybe haven't got the same response that I've gotten from my community. It's because of the city of Ames. It's because of Ames Police Department. It's because of Community and Family Resources. It's because of Voices for Non-Opioid Choices in Washington, D.C. All those folks that are part of those programs, they saved me. They made me more aware of maybe, my English teacher, I'm going to take you back. My English teacher always told me, you're never at a loss for words, Tasha. And she's right. I was very talkative in school, had a gift to gab, probably got in trouble a few times because of it. But I was just sharing with someone that during this process, I remember very vividly, I was down at Mercy and I had to step away. I didn't want to sleep because I thought that she needed to hear my voice. Tashara needed to feel me. But then there was also a side of me that wanted everyone else to get their time with her too, right? But I knew that I had some big decisions I was going to need to make, and I was going to need to get some rest. So I remember dozing off in the family room, and I had a very vivid dream, and it was Tashara talking to me. Now, mind you, I had mulled around what my plan was going to be. I just didn't know how I was going to implement it. And I really did think my mind was telling me that my son would be better off without me, right? That I had failed some way, somehow. And maybe I did make mistakes. I had Tashara when I was 19. No one gives you a blueprint and says, this is how you be a parent. This is how you be a good one. Our journey, it was me and her up until I had her in 91, and then I didn't have Devon until 2000. So it was just me and her really toggling ourselves, me as a single parent and her as an only child at that point. Just trying to do the best that I could to make sure that her journey, she got to where she wanted to be. And so I do feel at times that I maybe have failed her. I was a very, I think as single parents, our households were probably pretty much similar to a lot of your guys' households, maybe. I think as a single parent, at least for me, I felt like I needed to be overly protective. I needed to be her friend, right? Because I was 19 and it was cool to be, I wanted her to trust me, right? And I wanted her to be able to, if she found herself up against something, I want her to be able to talk to me and, more importantly, share with her things that I had done at her age. I don't know how I'm standing before you all today because of some of those things. I've had my own challenges, and thank God today I can stand before you and say that I've made it so that I can talk to you about her life and our life since 2016. And what during this vivid dream, you guys, I heard her real clearly say that, Mom, we've got to do this. We've got to do this together. We've got people to save. And guys, selfishly, it's like, why did it have to be her, right? Like, I still think that way. Why her? Why me? But being on the sidelines and doing nothing was not an option for me. I knew that I had to jump in, and I had to jump in with both feet. It's what works for me. It may not work for everybody else. And again, I've had such an amazing support team. Like, I don't know why they chose me to invest their time in, but they did. And I'm so, so very grateful. Tashara struggled with her mental health. And I think that's what it really boils down to. That evening wasn't about her partaking in anything criminal. It was about how she was feeling inside. And that's the only thing that I can truly believe that's why it happened the way that it did. And it was supposed to happen. You're probably thinking I'm crazy right now. I just feel that we have a purpose. Each of us has a purpose. And I truly believe this happens to be my purpose. And the last 6 years have taught me, number one, it's not about being perfect. It's about being more present. Present not only in my kid's life, but present in my life, showing up for me finally, being the fighter that the little girl Tasha needed back in the day. And so what I've decided to do, guys, is fight this horrendous opioid crisis that's in our country. I decided that my pain was actually going to be my armor, and all the way to DC. There's changes that need to be made in our criminal justice system. There's changes that need to be made in ending the stigma and silence surrounding overdose and substance use disorders. There's nothing wrong with these people. They're just like I mean, they're just like the person that you're sitting next to. We're all just human beings trying to do the best, right? And so I guess really what I want you guys to know is that, you know, if you find yourself up against something like this, I mean, don't feel, I mean, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, but honestly, there's help out there. There's people that want to help. I'm here, you know, I'm available. People tell me not to pass out my number, but I do, I've learned to be a better listener. I don't necessarily think that what I found that works for me may work for you. But I do know this, that the last 6 years have taught me that grief and loss, you can't tiptoe around any of the steps of grief. I wanted to, but you just can't. And you just got to, I've learned to sit with it. When stuff arises for me, I take time and I sit with it. And I've used what I've learned and what feels good to me to just maneuver my new world. It's hard for me to get out of bed in the morning, but I know that I have someone watching me, and that's my son. And I know that he's grieving. He's hit the anger part of grief, and he feels bad about it. I feel bad about it, but it's our reality. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of power behind every little aspect of grief that's given me strength. I mean, folks, my heart's never going to stop being broken. She is a part of me. She's my flesh and blood. And I'm worried that my son is gonna, this world is not kind to, we have to protect them protect our children from this world. There's great parts of this world, but there's also some really bad parts of this world, and people don't always have the best interest for your children that you do. And I wish I could have done something differently, but today I stand before you and I don't know that there's anything that I could have done differently that would have changed her circumstances. I just know that I can change her journey from here on out. And that's to share her story and share who she was, because she was so much bigger than what happened to her, guys. But I do feel obligated to really talk to you guys about what's here in Ames, and that when this all happened, we're talking about kids from Ames High School. We're talking about this stuff is happening in our schools, guys. And it's not to put a smudge on our school district, none of that. It's just that we need to open our eyes and we need to figure out ways that we can tackle this monster, and whether I'm a firm believer in harm reduction. I believe that these folks aren't going to come and meet us. We have to go and meet them where they're at. And some of those places aren't pleasant. I've suited up and I'm in it for the long haul, And so I guess as a community member, as someone who has children, who's had children in the Ames Community School District, I'm asking you to join us, and whether that's coming to the conversations like this and listening, and more importantly, hearing what we have to say. April's story, that's a vulnerable feeling, for her to share and open up with you guys. But she's human, right? We're all human. Our struggles really, I think April may not agree, maybe she will. Struggles can become our power and maneuvering ourselves, and they too recover. They can recover. And I just feel like we need to, have programs that are available to these folks. Have programs that are available to families that find themselves up against stuff like this. When I say stop the stigma, like, these people aren't trash, whatever stereotypes people have in their head, eliminate that, because it happens to everybody. I've known judges, I've known doctors, I've known nurses, long-time nurses that have become addicted to opiates, and it just, it's affecting everybody. I can't ask you, I'm pleading with you, honestly. I'm pleading with everybody just to be empathetic. We have a lot. It costs nothing to be kind, right? And you just never know who you might touch, by just taking time to smile at somebody, asking somebody, are you doing okay? When people ask me that, Mayor Hala asked me, how you doing? I'm doing, that's kind of what I say anymore. I'm doing, today's a good day, tomorrow may not be a good day. But when people get up and talk about these things, try and be as present as you possibly can. I see some familiar faces in the audience, some people I went to school with, teacher that may have had Tashara in her class. Listen, I thank you for being here tonight. I know that this is time out of your probably hectic lives, but I appreciate it. I appreciate that April shared tonight. Thank you so much for sharing, by the way. It allows me to maybe get to know your side of the story a little bit more. And when I said it's not about being perfect for me, so when I share with you that I am still very angry about how Tashara's life ended, some of that may be I'm angry with her too. I'm just angry with the situation, and I had hoped that I could do more. So what I've really tried to do is involve myself. Community and Family Resources has truly been my link to making sure Tashara didn't die in vain, keeping her memory alive, whether it's the billboards that they, the initiative that they did, or that they have done. I mentioned traveling to Washington, D.C., and that's addressing our federal insurances, so our Medicaid and Medicare insurances, making it so that they have options. So they have options on alternative forms of pain management, because oftentimes, folks, what we're seeing is addiction starts right in your own medicine cabinet. And it's, if you're not using it, get rid of it. There's all sorts of drug drop-off places. And if you don't know, ask somebody. They're there, I promise you. And if you don't want to drop them off, get a hold of me. I'll drop them off for you. I'll come and get it. CFR does put packets together. We do have a solution that breaks down some of that older medication so it doesn't get into the wrong hands. Just be more mindful, about, if you're post-op surgery and you don't use all your pain pills, or be an advocate for yourself. It's okay. You don't have to go with what the doctor says. And so I guess, folks, what I'm really just trying to say, I can ramble. What I'm really just trying to say is that, it's here. It's here in Ames. It's here in our schools. Some change really needs to happen. We're losing about 200 people a day to overdoses. And the harder I fight, the more life is lost. So if you're willing to suit up with us, we sure would appreciate it. We hold an overdose awareness event every year. And I'm a firm believer that mental health and substance use go hand in hand. So if we can tackle the two of them and look around outside of your own personal space, there's so much need out there, and everything isn't just what you see on the surface. You have to peel back that onion to find out what's really going on. And you just may find out some of these people have a lot of similarities, right? And I'm here. So if you all need me, I'm a phone call away. People know how to get a hold of me. But I truly, honestly, I truly appreciate you guys coming out tonight and being present. Thank you.
To do Natasha's video that she wanted her to.
Let's do this. Let's go ahead and have the panel discussion, question and answers, and then maybe we can go ahead and close with that. And even if after we officially finish, maybe we can run it. So thank you, April and Tasha, for being just so open and vulnerable. And it's very powerful, both of you. And I think it definitely demonstrates how these substance abuse does tie in with mental health. So with that, we're going to transition into a panel discussion. So those who are on the panelists, if you just mind coming up here, and we're going to have Nicole Patton, who is the associate principal at Ames High, will be up here, and then Chief Jeff Huff from the Ames Police Department. Then we have Ryan Doyle, Health Promotion Coordinator for Collegiate Recovery and Substance Use Initiatives from Iowa State. Mickey Chauvin, is that right? Chauvin, I'm sorry, my apologies. Clinical Director for CFR, and then Matthew Voorhees, Director of Ember Recovery at YSS. And there are essentially 5 questions that they have been asked to talk about. And the first is just describe why substance use is a problem in Ames, and what are your specific concerns? Secondly, what substances are being used, and what are the myths around those substances? 3 is just describe in brief addiction. What does that look like? Who can become addicted? And we actually probably heard some stories already tonight about that happening and how it can happen. What services and supports are available to help address substance abuse disorders in your specific sphere of influence? And then just describe the stigma that impacts people from getting help and how we can move past that. So I guess we'll just start with Chief Huff, and then we'll just, you can just go down, and if each of you can take maybe 8-10 minutes at most, each of you, and then we'll have question and answers after that.
Mayor, I thought I would start by just giving you a snapshot of what we're seeing here in Ames, because it is here, as Tasha told us. So I've got some statistics from this previous quarter on what our drug task force has been seeing. And so I'm just going to go through a few of these, probably the most troubling ones. We are seeing a little bit of cocaine, but not a lot in Ames. We see ecstasy or MDMA from time to time. We do see some heroin, fentanyl, obviously, as we've been talking about that, LSD, marijuana cartridges, edibles. We're seeing meth, oxycodone, other miscellaneous prescription, mostly pain medications. We're starting to see an increase in mushrooms or psilocybin. And then what you may hear called M30, which is actually just a pill that looks like oxycodone, but it's actually probably more fentanyl that's in it. So that's just what we're seeing on a pretty regular basis around Ames. What I'll tell you is your methamphetamines and your fentanyl are generally coming from either Mexico or overseas, like China be one of the manufacturers of fentanyl. We no longer really see much marijuana coming in from Mexico right now, which is where we used to see a lot of it. Right now, it's coming from other places in the United States because it's legal in some places. So I think we're seeing that. The other thing that I'll tell you is partially because of Tashira, we carry Narcan. So that was one of those first cases that I think convinced us that the police department should carry Narcan. And so we started after that. And I wanted to give you another snapshot of what we're using it lately. So I'm only going to go back to 2021. So just a few years. And I'm going to give you the dates and the ages, the doses, and then what we think may have been the substance, because I think it's important for all those. because it really is reflective all across. So in March of last year, we had a 25-year-old male that overdosed. The fire department gave Narcan. Also, an AED was used. Subject was transported to Mary Greeley, and we don't know what the outcome was. Also in March, a 47-year-old female was given 2 doses of Narcan. AED again was used, transported to the hospital. I don't know the outcome. Also in March of last year, a 32-year-old male, 1 dose of Narcan by the paramedics. We believe it may have been Percocet, and this was actually after a stop for a potential OWI. So someone that was all over the road got stopped and was in the middle of an overdose. June, 37-year-old male, 1 dose of Narcan, also an AED. This was a death. Believe it was heroin, fentanyl, and meth. Also in June of last year, a 25-year-old female, 1 dose of Narcan, lots of narcotics. Don't know exactly what it was. July of last year, 24-year-old male, 2 doses of Narcan prior to even our arrival. So it must have been someone that had it with them. It was a roommate, and heroin. September, 60-year-old male, 1 dose of Narcan, transported to Mary Greeley. Don't know the outcome. September of last year, 29-year-old male, 1 dose of Narcan, AED used, suspected oxycodone, possibly laced with fentanyl. December of last year, 38-year-old male, 2 doses of Narcan, taken to the hospital. January of last year, 30-year-old male, 2 doses, AED, baggie seized, tested positive for fentanyl. Again, January last year, 33-year-old male, 1 dose of Narcan, AED was used. This person did not make it. Fentanyl and cocaine and a few other drugs were found. Again, still in January last year, 45-year-old male, 1 dose, AED, unknown drug. 20-year-old female, 2 doses of Narcan, unknown what drugs were taken. February, 21-year-old male, 2 doses of Narcan, found some marijuana and some of those pills I was talking about, those M30, which are fentanyl pills. I'm going to stop there because there's 2 more pages. And what I can tell you is on each one of these pages, you're going to find ages ranging from 17 to, I think, 70. So it's across a very wide group of people. So it is here. It is a problem. Obviously concerning. We're deploying Narcan. Our officers are deploying Narcan on a pretty regular basis, probably averaging at least once a month right now. We had seen a time where when we first started carrying Narcan, we had a number of deployments. And then we had a period of time where we didn't have any for a while. And we thought, well, maybe it's not going to get as bad here in Ames as it's been in some other places. But for the last few years, we've just seen an increase. And I think it's a lot of things. I think the pandemic has been part of this. People have had a little bit too much free time. There's a lot of depression, anxiety. There's a lot of self-medication. I agree that mental health and substance abuse kind of go hand in hand. And so I believe that's also part of this. One of the strategies that we do use is the alternatives program, which I think Shelby spoke at the last community conversation we had. And that's a program where we divert an arrest from the criminal justice system to alternatives, which is a program where we try and get people into a program, basically. So instead of charging someone or arresting someone, we divert. There's other cases where we can't divert someone from pre-arrest. We have to make an arrest for whatever reason. And we also do post-arrest diversion. So the jail will pick up on it after the fact, and then they will make that referral to alternatives. So there's those kind of programs that are out there. And you all already know Julie Saxton, our mental health advocate, her world is spread a little bit between mental health and substance abuse because they do go hand in hand. And so she will also look for opportunities to either directly try and get people into services, or she'll also make referrals to Shelby and alternatives. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we're seeing in Ames right now. I'm not sure if Tasha shared this, but the person that supplied the U4 was a high school student at Ames High. That's where it came from. Ordered from China over the dark web, but you don't need the dark web to get this stuff. So that just happens to be that case. So it is everywhere. Maybe you'll use that one. I don't know.
I feel like you're by yourself over there. Maybe
I am
should go
now.
and sit over there so I could. So can you guys hear me on the microphone? Is it coming across? Okay, I'll come over to Josh.
Sorry.
No, I'm kind of going to go off the cuff. It's been a crazy day. I've been at state basketball for Roland Story today, but I'm so honored to be here. I think I'm just going to kind of share some different things that are going on. Nicole Patton, associate principal at Ames High. You were talking. I was like, I know Tasha. She was a year younger than me. So it's good to see you. So, and I'm sorry that happened. It breaks my heart for you. I think, when I go back to my high school days, the big thing was alcohol, right? We would party, that was a thing, right? And then I think about my brother who's 5 years younger than me, and it was, pot. And then, and I just think about what our kids are going through, and it just seems to, every couple of years, it seems to be getting worse. And the things that we're doing are getting worse. One thing I do see with kids, and it goes back to that resilience piece that we talked about a couple of meetings ago, or it might have been a meeting ago, and the resiliency, our kids want to quickly cover what they're feeling instead of work through what they're feeling. And so then they turn to drugs and alcohol. I see it in little bits of conversations I have. It might be a simple sample, but I see this on a bigger scale too. But I do see it, like even with my son, he's like, oh, I need to take this Dayquil, which I don't want my kids taking a lot of medicine. I know Dayquil seems very quiet, you don't think of it as huge, but he's like, well, I'm feeling this way, so I'm going to do this. And I'm like, are really those your symptoms? And I do see kids to take it the other way is, I'm feeling this way, so I'm going to take pot. I have, if you go to Ames High, we do have marijuana. I find marijuana in kids a lot. I find the vape pens, not good ones. And so it's just really, it is an epidemic of what we're going through. I have kids high in the hallway. I call them out. And then we end up sending them home. But the crazy thing is it doesn't, it doesn't judge. Like drugs it can happen to anybody. And I think sometimes I'm thinking of two different instances, and I'm just going to walk you through them, I guess. I have one kid who goes to the bathroom all the time, high all the time, just want him to know he's loved, just want to know he's there for him, just want to know somebody's there for him, right? And then I have another child whose mother came up to me and said, it's okay. We know he does pot, but it's just for anxiety and we control it. I about fell off my chair. So we have that going on, and we have the kid, but here's the thing, that parent thinks they're better, right? No. And so until we really start seeing that we have an issue and there is a problem, then there's nothing we can really do to help that. I am a firm believer that every child needs an adult to go to. I don't care if it's my custodian. I don't care if it's my cook. I think some of you might have heard me say that before. Every child needs to feel loved in my school. Every child needs to know that they're welcome to my school, and I want them to have a contact of somebody that they trust. And that's super important for me. The relationships, and I tell our staff all the time, the relationships that we have with our children is one that can help them possibly get out of trouble or not make bad decisions, right? They need to know they have an adult, because not everybody has those stellar parents that are always there for them. And so we can be that support for them at school. So Ames High does have a drug problem. We're not going to shy away from it, but it is something we need to work on. Sad to say, we are not alone. as I talk to other administrators across the state of Iowa, they are seeing the exact same things. So when people say, oh, Ames has really kind of gone downhill, I'm like, well, I've talked to the Waukee principal and I can let you know what he says too, right? So like, it is all over. It's not just us. And we do need to start working towards helping our kids get that grit, get that resilience, to be able to charge forward with some of their emotions and feelings that they're going to, right? So I think that's all I'm going to say right now on that. I think it's you.
Awesome. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Well, it's a little loud. Thank you. My name is Ryan Doyle. I work for Iowa State University. I oversee a couple of programs there, including our Substance Use Initiatives program, which has to do a lot with our substance use prevention on campus, policies and work we do around that, as well as a community we have for students in recovery from addiction. So we have a community on campus. We have peer support meetings. We have services on campus for that. And I oversee both those programs. I want to first of all thank the city for having this. One of the things that I think is most important about fixing a problem is talking about it, and this is not a popular problem to talk about. If you know anything about the university, we have potential students come, we have potential parents come. Not a lot of parents want to bring their kids over to the table talking about recovery. Don't want to talk about that. It's not a thing they're going to need. No, thank you. That's not my kid. It's easy not to talk about it. It's easy to say, well, that's not me. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to hear about it. But that doesn't do any good to fix it. So a lot of we have some of the questions here. I kind of want to really start with that education, that talking about it, because I think that is really, really critical. People don't talk about it. And when you don't talk about something, it's usually because there's a stigma about it. And I don't think anyone in this room is surprised to hear there's a stigma about substance use. One of the things I find it very important to do is anytime I get a chance to, and when it fits, I always like to mention, I have credentials what I do, but one of the things that also is a credential for what I do is I'm a person in long-term recovery from addiction. And I didn't until I started working and I was lucky enough to go to academic conferences where I heard people say that when they didn't have to. And there's a reason for it. It gives a person who has not seen what recovery can look like an example of what it could. That's not I am what recovery looks like, but I am a person in recovery. And that idea that it could be anyone sitting next to you, absolutely. And that's part of it is also like a lot of what was shared, the really courageous stories from both April and Tasha tonight was that it is, this is something that does impact all of us. And what Nicole was sharing about that what students, that idea that, they don't always understand why maybe potentially they're using a substance because we don't always have the conversations of what is substance use look like. One of the substances, and I've only heard it shared a couple times in passing, the substance that we see a lot of the actual harms from, most deaths in Iowa, most treatment admissions, most hospitalizations in Iowa, actually is alcohol. The most common substance use disorder is alcohol. Most common reason why people are going to die early or die traumatically or die in a car crash are all going to be alcohol. It's not a popular thing because that's a very easy thing, and many people can drink without addiction impacting their lives. So it's not as I think it's sometimes as scary as some of the other substances, but it's one that often doesn't get talked about. We see it a lot in the university. I'm sure people all the time, they think, oh, college students drink a lot, and believe it or not, that impacts the students themselves. We ask the students, what percentage of your peers do you think drink alcohol? And the students' response, their perception of their peers was 97%. They thought 97% of their peers were drinking. It's about only 80%. So there's about 1 in 5 students their entire time at university that never drinks any alcohol ever. That's 1 in 5. A fifth of our campus doesn't drink alcohol. Now, that is very surprising to most students and usually to a lot of adults I talk to. They really do assume every college student drinks, and that's a stereotype. That's this idea that, of course, and it has a problem because if I'm a college student and I'm drinking, well, I have to drink. I'm a college student. If I'm drinking a lot, that's okay. I'm drinking a lot. I'm a college student. I can using other substances. It's not that big of a deal. And this idea of marijuana or other substances becoming more. If it just seems like, well, everyone's doing it, then it becomes easier for people to justify their own use. And looking at the actual facts of who is using and who isn't. I meet many students that don't think that marijuana can be addictive. That's a very, very common first thing. I don't have an addiction. You can't get addicted to marijuana. It's the second most common reason why people in the state of Iowa go to addiction treatment is marijuana. I think this definitely does need to be talked about. I think there's a lot that doesn't. One of the things that I found very interesting was a report last month from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Association. They're a federal agency, does a lot of great research. 94% of people with a substance use disorder did not receive treatment in the last year. And if 94% of people were walking around, broke their arm and were just decided that's the way their arm looks from now on, we'd say there's a problem with medical literacy, that people aren't going to the hospital and getting that treated. But when 94% of people with substance use disorder aren't receiving treatment, that's where we're at. That's our reality right now. So talking about it, I think, is the number one thing. I just want to first, that I think is the most important thing, and then sharing about it and making sure that people hear from it. Students, I think, definitely need to hear. I'd love to say we have a great program. You just show this video to students and it'll fix everything. Or, a lot of that conversation starts best at home, starts best with parents, and it's a tough conversation to have. No one wants to have that conversation. That's not my kid. Again, not my kid, but it could be anyone's kid, and it's important that these conversations happen in home, out of the home, in rooms like this, and in other places. So. I'm sure it's a panel, so I'd love to go and make sure others get a chance to share. But I think that's just where something I wanted to share from what these questions were. So thank you.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay? All right. I'm Matthew Voorhees. I'm the program director for YSS. Ember Recovery is what our residential substance use services are being called now. I actually operate a couple of houses right down here, a couple blocks, for young boys and young girls, adolescents who are in need of substance use treatment. I've worked in treatment. I've been a part of treatment for 23 years. I just appreciate the stories that I've heard today. I myself was also an addict, and I was convicted felon, went through all that stuff, was able to get pardoned by the governor of Indiana, where I'm from, with the work that I was able to do. But it does affect everyone. And, the kids that we see, we deal with ages, I don't know if I said 12 to 18. The kids that we see come from every kind of background. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. They come from homes that are together. They come from broken homes. They come from, well-off homes. They come from poor homes, and everywhere in between. And I do agree. I think, Tasha, you were maybe talking about this, but it's, they have a hurt. They have a pain. There's something going on in their heart that they're needing. You see the kids running around, and they're running around the community, and they're being crazy, and they're doing all the stupid stuff, right? And it's really easy to get super annoyed by them and look at them as just scum or whatever. I think people do that, right? But those are kids, and they need help, and so that's what we get to deal with every day. Those kids who have come to us for help and kind of been forced there a little bit. There's a little bit of desire they have, but we're trying to nurture that in them when they, at this age, right? The desire to change. They're kind of in that pre-contemplative state, at that time. And it's a tough battle. And, at YSS, we've really invested a lot in the family connection. And so building recovery through relationships, through connections is really, really important. And so we really try to do everything we can to engage the family, siblings, moms, dads, grandma, grandpas, whoever's involved in their life, and get them there at the table, because we don't, for adolescents too, we can be sometimes seen as a dumping ground. Like, I'm just going to dump my kid because it's their problem and not my problem, right? I'm tired of this. And we don't want that. That's, we need to work together as a family. And so we really believe in that quite a bit. What we're seeing, we're seeing a lot of marijuana. I'm glad marijuana has been mentioned so many times, because it's a big problem for our adolescents. And the message that they're hearing, of course, everywhere, is that marijuana is okay. Marijuana is going to be legal everywhere. It's going to be just fine. And so they're using it. And unfortunately, for the adolescent, our brains don't fully develop really until age 25 or so. And in their developing brain, marijuana really impacts the growth of that brain, really hinders a lot of things, hurts their memory, right? Hurts their ability to function. And sometimes they're using it for stress and anxiety. And what does marijuana actually end up doing? It causes more stress and anxiety, right? And that's the lie that, of course, all drugs tell us quite a bit. We actually had to deal with a overdose not too long ago for us that involved Ames PD, and thankfully that individual survived, but that was really tough. And our kids, they go out. Sometimes they run. Sometimes, and they'll be out on the streets, and it's scary on one hand. And Ames is not a bad city at all. I think it's the same kind of town as almost any other kind of town, right? But an adolescent can leave our facility and find any of these drugs just like that. Super easy, within an hour. There's people who will be able to give it to them, who will take them into their home, who will do those things. And that's the scary part. So it's definitely here. It's not just Ames. We have kids from all over the state of Iowa, from Sioux City to Council Bluffs, Cedar Rapids, everywhere. And it's the same in all those communities too. And so I think really what I want to share too is about the stigma as well. A lot of our kids have a hard time, going back to their schools, going back to, or getting treatment in the first place. Because, we'll have a lot of kids pretend like they were somewhere else when they've gone through treatment. They're not going to tell their friends that they actually went through treatment. They're not going to talk about their recovery. They're not going to be open about it. I share my story all the time because I believe what others have shared too is that being open, sharing, being transparent, offers hope to others. And we help try to teach our adolescents that too while they're with us. It's not just about stopping using for these kids. They have work to do in their hearts. They have work to do on character. They have things that they need to grow and develop. And so we try to tackle all of that while they're with us at YSS for sure. So I'm honored to be here. I appreciate being here. And I think that kind of summarizes for me.
Okay, so can everybody hear me? All right. So I'm Mickey Shubin with Community and Family Resources. I am actually the prevention supervisor. So treatment kind of falls out of my purview, but I had some help. That's why I have my computer up here. Some people that do that work at our agency have helped me out with some of these questions. So really, unfortunately, like everybody else has said, it is really a problem everywhere. It's not concentrated in bigger towns or smaller towns, or it is everywhere. And substance use disorders that are not treated can affect every facet of someone's life, their physical health, their mental well-being, their families, their relationships, all of that stuff can be impacted. So one thing that I hope that you take away from tonight is that treatment is available, people can recover, and they can end up being very healthy human beings. Like YSS was just saying here, the person needs to deal with the things that have made them turn to substances, and then healing can begin. So really what we see with community and family resources as far as substances that are used in the Ames area, like Ryan said, alcohol is number one, marijuana is number two, and methamphetamine is number three. So opioid use is also on the rise. It's very, very powerful. We also have illicitly manufactured fentanyl. As you've heard from our speakers, it really is one of those drugs that just destroys everything. We find it cut in with cocaine, methamphetamine, opioids. It can be put into anything. Fentanyl can be laced on any other substance. And a lot of times, the person doesn't even know that it's there. That's why it's so dangerous. I actually do work with Natasha on the overdose awareness events. I'm the one that has provided some of the Narcan trainings because I really do think that it is super important. You never know what is going to happen. Some people do get addicted through prescription medication. Once those prescriptions run out and they can no longer get it from physicians, they turn to illicitly manufactured drugs. They could go to heroin, which has similar properties or makes them feel in a similar way as an opioid. And then, if they get the wrong pill that is laced with fentanyl, it can turn out really, really bad. So I'm really honored to be able to help with Natasha's journey and her fight. Just making sure that we get everybody we can to be carrying Narcan. It's nothing that's going to hurt anybody else. It could possibly save someone's life. I would say, let's see here, one of the big myths around substances is that, alcohol is not really that bad. As Ryan said, alcohol is the number one substance that is abused. And a lot of people don't understand that there are different, there's excessive drinking, there's heavy drinking, there's binge drinking, there's all of these different stages, kind of, if you will. And it just kind of depends on the person. Some people are a little bit more prone to having an addiction because of their genetics. So, if that person has that predisposition and they go to college and they drink, or they go to work right out of high school and it's a career that maybe notoriously has a 12-pack after they get off work, the addiction can build a lot faster. It just depends where you're at on that spectrum. Let's see here. So looking at addiction, what does it look like and who can become addicted? Anybody. It can look like the person next to you, like Natasha said. Really, it does not discriminate against any sort of race, ethnicity, gender, age, background, any of that. A person that develops a problem with substances, like I said, it can be due to somewhat to genetics. And it also, once someone uses a substance, it structurally changes your brain and the chemicals in your brain. So that pleasurable feeling that they get drives the addiction. It makes them want to use and use more. And a lot of times, once someone has used, their addiction just kind of progresses because of dependence and because they are, let's see here, what am I looking for here? Their tolerance has increased, so they use more and more. So making sure that people know about treatment services and about, all the great different resources there are out there, like Your Life Iowa. You can look up on Your Life Iowa and find any different kind of drug you want to talk about. You can locate where it has warning signs, symptoms, all of that kind of stuff, all on yourlifeiowa.org. So that's a great resource. Talking to anybody that's up here is a great resource. But if you want to do it on the anonymity of a computer, Your Life Iowa is a great option. So let's see here. I want to make sure I don't take up too much time, but I want to make sure that I say everything that they're telling me to say. So basically, treatment works. We use evidence-based treatment, and that's available at CFR along with other agencies here locally. Treatment ranges, from a variety of different things. It could be from detox or withdrawal management all the way up to, outpatient treatment. I know YSS has treatment facilities here in Ames. Our residential treatment service is in Fort Dodge. We also have a small adolescent unit that's called STARS. So in Ames, we actually have like the medication assisted treatment, and we have outpatient services where people can come to groups and have individual counseling sessions. So there are also things such as AA and NA that are a great way to help peers, have peer help. And then there are recovery services also. We do have things such as, help with transportation, trying to help someone that is trying to overcome an addiction with getting appropriate clothing for job interviews. There's a wide range of things that we can help someone with. We just have to get to that person and meet them where they are, like Natasha said. So any help would be great. As far as the stigma aspect, I actually do a lot of trainings on stigma, and stigma against substance use disorders, stigma against mental health disorders. Those are all very serious, very real things that happen. And it does impact the person because it makes it so that they are less likely to seek out treatment, to be engaged in treatment, and continue treatment. So their, diagnosis might be a substance use disorder having to do with alcohol or with opioids. They may not get that treatment just because they feel like everybody is looking down on them, like they are less than the person, and they aren't. We're all human beings. We all have faults. Sometimes it has to do with a substance. Sometimes it doesn't. But when it's a substance, you can get treatment.
While you're walking up, I just want to mention. There it goes. That we have a drug drop box down at the police department in the public lobby. It is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So at any time of the day or night, you can come down. It looks like a mailbox, but it's white. And you can just drop whatever you want in there, and we'll make sure that it's disposed of. So any unwanted, unused medications, we've even found illegal substances in there before, and that's fine too, because we'll get rid of those too. So it's always available.
Thank you, panel. I wrote down a number of questions, but I want to first see if there's anybody in the audience that has any questions for the panelists. And I'm going to repeat the question so we can make sure it gets caught on our recording. So if you can go ahead and speak loudly, and I'll repeat the question. Or Deb's going to be our mic. So if you don't mind, go ahead. Deb, I think just over here. Yeah, because what I'll do is we are recording this, and so and just good news is our other sessions we've had previously were recorded, and we've seen anywhere from I think 200 to 400 views of those already, and this one will also be recorded. It's on the City of Ames website. It's also, I think we probably can put out some information on how you can access it, but so we're just thrilled that so many people are availing themselves of the of this resource. So please go ahead.
Okay, so I went to Ames High. I was born and raised here in Ames. So things have definitely changed from when I was in school and having those talks about drugs and alcohol. I'm actually a student at the University of Iowa, a graduate student studying social work. So we talk a lot about policy in schools and how to address mental health and drug addiction. There's some schools in Des Moines that have implemented Narcan in their school districts at different schools. I'm wondering if that's something Ames has done or is considering doing or having in the nurses station.
Currently getting trained to be able to do that. So I forgot to mention that. I actually told him, I was like, hey, I forgot to say our nurses. She came up to me and said she is working on being able to get that in our school.
lady on the end, you're the it's not in order, it's over here. So you were talking about how, like, there a lot of like consequences of drug addiction and how it affects people emotionally and all that jazz, especially their families. Also, you've mentioned that this fentanyl stuff can just be on anything too. It's anything, anywhere. The cross contamination factor is phenomenal. Jumping from that over to the chief of police over here. You guys mentioned that you had found drugs that were laced with fentanyl as well. Also mentioned that it was tested and found to have fentanyl. Was that external or internal testing process?
So you're asking, do we do testing at the police department?
Yeah.
So it's both. So we have preliminary tests that we can do to try and identify at least a class of drugs. But when we need something tested, we generally send it down to the DCI lab for kind of a second check to do that analysis to make sure that we know what we have.
Yeah, well, the actual test strips, I looked into this a while ago. I was really mad about it, but testing for on a consumer scale, test strips are actually illegal to possess. It's in some states they've actually made it legal, but not here in Iowa. Mr. Iowa State.
For anybody?
What's up?
Do you have a specific question you want to pose?
Mr. Iowa State. You're dealing with the Iowa State students. One of the things that I was like investigating into myself, and I've actually been over to like your office years ago. It wasn't you I talked to though. But how often do you run into homeless students dealing with the mental illness and drug addiction?
So housing instability is something that absolutely can contribute towards whether or not someone, is a life factor that can impact a whole host of things. Whether or not they'll use substances is one of them. Very often, though, there is a much greater perception that, oh, yeah, if someone's using substances, then they probably are insecurely housed, or they use the term homeless. We try and move away in a lot of terms we use from just, calling someone, saying that person is homeless, because now that's their whole life. The same way of saying that person is an alcoholic or is an addict. We try and use person first language. So we say person who's experiencing homelessness or insecure housing, or person experiencing addiction, because they're a person first. We do have some students who have insecure housing or have food instability. Those are both things that we know are absolutely the detriments to a whole host of different factors about their lives. None of the data I'm aware of really shows any direct thing that says that, insecure housing is directly correlated to them using substances or developing a substance use disorder. But there is sometimes there's a problem with that perception, because then if someone says, well, if I have secure housing, then I probably am not, I'm not a drug addict. They'll use terms like that. But, if I have secure housing, I'm probably okay. I still have a place to sleep. So it can't be that bad. And that's one of those barriers to addiction that we've been talking about, that, that idea if things are going well, then obviously, I can't have an addiction. And it can't happen to anyone. Someone who's not securely housed or isn't, in a house at the time, absolutely can fall victim to addiction. But we see that with people with absolutely very secure housing. I don't know of any correlation with it, but it is something that we do sometimes see with the stigma of that. It must be, because they're homeless that's caused. So great question. I appreciate you bringing it up.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I had a question about the Narcan too. Like you were saying, you're training nurses at school. I'm a nurse. I'm wondering, why wouldn't that be more readily available for people that are aware of people that are on the edge of overdosing, things like that? I mean, I don't know what the process is as far as having that accessible to the public, but I'm kind of surprised that it's not. But yeah.
Well, I can try. It's available to anyone. In Iowa, you can't just hand it out, though. You do still have to have a prescription. So you can get it from a pharmacy. You just have to go through the training. I'll be honest, it's not very difficult. The training that you go through, it's basically recognizing the signs and symptoms of a potential overdose. The good thing about Narcan or naloxone is it's pretty hard not to get it right. So if you give it to someone that's not actually in an opioid-based overdose, it's probably not going to harm them either. So if you get it wrong, it's okay. That's why it was pretty easy for the police department, fire department to start carrying it so that we could use it. So, but you do have to go through a little bit of training to get it. It's still pretty easy. Some states pretty much just hand it out, but we're not there yet.
Can I add to that? Sure.
You bet.
Is it on now? Okay, there we go. Actually, we just had a meeting with members from Mary Greeley, their emergency department director and stuff this morning, because we were talking about opioids here and fentanyl in our facilities, because we've seen an increase with the clients coming in for that and for Percocets and things like that. And so all of our staff are also getting trained on Narcan. We have Narcan at all our facilities, but it's hard to test for too, is what they were sharing with me, because it comes in so many different varieties that sometimes even that we don't have fentanyl strip tests, but some of the things that you do test for, it's hard for that to even pick up. And that they were even sharing that in the hospital, sometimes even if someone used fentanyl, it might not show up on a tox screen perhaps. And so you might not know that that's what's going on. And so it's definitely a difficult thing to handle.
That with Community and Family Resources, we actually have the state opioid response grant. So I do have community trainings that I do. Like I said, with Natasha, we do the Overdose Awareness Day. I have trained some of the Ames school staff. It is available for schools to have now. Like he was saying, for each of their buildings, they have some. So there is a sheet that businesses can fill out, or schools, to have 5 boxes of Narcan. There's 2 doses in each box at each location. So I can help with that. I also, like I said, provide the training. And it really is not very hard at all. Basically, you just have to sit and watch the screen for a little bit, half an hour, 45 minutes, so that I can explain, the signs and symptoms and what exactly to do. And then you get a certificate. You take it to the pharmacy. They give you your Narcan. We also have a program here in Iowa that's called Naloxone Iowa, or Iowa Naloxone. I can't remember. Natasha, do you remember? Naloxone Iowa. Okay. So that is where you can go on that website, and you can actually set up a telehealth appointment. And doctors from the University of Iowa, I believe, will do a little training with you, and then they will actually send the Narcan to your house. You can also go to any pharmacy that participates, and their pharmacist will do a little training with you, and you can get it that way. Most pharmacies have a physician that has like a standing order script that will be able to get you the Narcan. And like they were saying, if it's someone that is not overdosing on an opioid, such as fentanyl or oxycodone or whatever, it's not going to hurt them giving them Narcan. Basically, all Narcan does is it goes to the opioid receptors in our brain. It knocks the opioid off, replaces with the Narcan. It pulls them out of the overdose. Then they need to seek medical treatment soon after that, because it does not stay in your system very long, anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes that it stays in your system. So if you have enough opioids in your system to go back to those opioid receptors, that person can actually go back into an overdose. That's why we always want to make sure that we're calling 911, having law enforcement, somebody there to assist with getting that person further treatment. But it's really easy, and I do believe everyone should have it. That's why I'm so passionate about making sure that I do any and every training that I can. So
In a discussion that I was having with our executive director for community and family resources, Michelle Della Riva, she meets with the governor's office, our attorney general. One of the things that I had found in my research that I'm always kind of picking her brain is Narcan accessibility and accessibility that goes along with ending the stigma. These folks aren't going to walk into a pharmacy to get this stuff. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. It's great that that's where we're moving, the direction we're moving in. I think I had mentioned to Michelle, I see Indiana has got these vending machines, and it is being discussed for the state of Iowa. We seem to be a little bit lagged here in Iowa on urgency. And I don't care where you sit politically. This is a bipartisan initiative that needs to have more attention drawn to it. So that's kind of what I'm working on this year. I don't know what fight I have up against me in getting it here, but that's kind of what I'm seeing. If Indiana has it, I don't understand why Iowa doesn't have it. So.
Okay, my name is Doug Pepe. As a as a person who uses drugs and a person with lived experience, I guess I just have a question for the panel to expand on. On the one hand, this is treated as a public health issue, while on the other hand, this is treated as a coercive, punitive criminal issue. How can that be reconciled? Thank you.
So I think the programs that we've been using is trying to divert from the criminal justice system when the primary issue is a substance use disorder. We're trying to do a better job of diverting those folks from the criminal justice system because it doesn't do any good to continually arrest somebody over and over and over again. They're not getting help. They're not going to get help. So our program is called Alternatives. And so in that way, when our officers encounter people who they believe probably have a substance use disorder of some kind, they'll try and divert them on the front side if they can. There are times when we can't do that. There has to be an arrest. There's maybe been a victim involved, whatever. But that doesn't mean that on the back end or on the jail side, they still can't do a diversion at that point. Get them into a program. We've dropped charges in the past, reduced charges in the past, all those kind of things to try and get people out of that cycle of being arrested and really not getting the treatment that they really need. Does that answer your question? All right. Thank you.
Actually, just wanted to share my experience with actually trying to get Narcan because after taking the overdose awareness thing, I had my certificate, and before that, so Jim Davis from the jail diversion program, him and I were both actually working on something, and he had, back when I was in the jail diversion program, he took me to the pharmacy and I asked them right there on the spot, and they said that I could get Narcan, and they ran it through Medicaid, and I was told that anybody on Medicaid can get it one time once a year. But I will tell you that after that, I gone to a Mary Greeley doctor and got stigma. She kept accusing me of being a drug addict, and she didn't know my past, but I'm convinced that that was in my file as a prescription that was on my record. So what I'm hearing all this awesome stuff, and I think Narcan, Jim Davis wants to carry it, but we're not getting any confirmed answers on which pharmacies. Pharmacies, I've been told that they don't carry it on hand, so they can get it, but it's going to take a while. And I've had pharmacies, several of them tell me that, and it's been the same, that they just don't have it on hand. So I mainly just wanted to share that.
For Ames area, New Cara Pharmacy is the one that we use. We direct our people that we train to them. because we actually purchase the Narcan and then they keep it until our people that we train need it. So New Cara Pharmacy here in Ames should have some on hand. If they don't, please let me know so that we can get some more there.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pose a question for the panel, and that is, Nicole, you mentioned that there are issues, and I think that everyone here wants to help. So what are some practical things, I'd like to have each one of you, share, what are some practical things that as a community and as individuals we can take away that can start helping? And people that know me know that, first of all, we need to treat and deal with the issue, but I'm really about how do you get down to the root and how can we help prevent? We need both, but I'm just thinking, and I just took a couple of notes. You mentioned that kids, I think you said kids cover what they're feeling versus dealing with what they're feeling. Is that right? I was trying to write it down fast. Anyway, and they need to be loved, welcomed, and they need one adult, they can go to, which I found interesting was that I was privileged to be part of the school district strategic planning session that went on here recently. And there's a student there, and he said, every student needs to have one adult. Boy, that sounds like a very similar situation. But help everyone understand, what can we do to try and help those who may not have an issue yet, or who do, what can we do to help? I think it's everyone can answer that question, not just one.
Right, well, I guess I'll just real quick. I'm a big start with a why. Why do we have that behavior? And so when we look at the behavior, we need to understand the why behind it, right? I don't know all the different things that the children are going through, but I do know that they need somebody, and I do know that they need access to be able to have the help that they need. That's why I think when you think about drug addiction and alcohol addiction and all that stuff, a lot of it is with mental health. And so that's why at Ames High, we're really trying to really focus on that now. Bonnie's in the audience. She's my go-to person at Ames High. When we have a crisis and a kid's in a crisis mode, I'm always like, hey, have you met Bonnie? But we also have those counselors that come in every day of the week from a different counseling center, just to be able to help those kids, right? I think a few of you have heard me say that. We just think it's really important to understand the why we're having behaviors, because they do it because they're trying to escape something, right? And so instead of being able to have the grit to be able to walk through it, maybe they don't have somebody to walk through it with them. And that's why I think that one-on-one person is really super important, to be able to have that person on their side no matter what, and non-judgmental, and just to love on that child, I kind of used it. After I said it, I was like, oh, geez, I made my son sound really bad there. I wasn't trying to say like he's on Dayquil all the time like that, but I was trying to say like, it starts simple and then it can escalate, right? But I find that our kids don't have the grit and the resilience they need to be able to deal with things. So then they find that easiest thing. And sometimes that easiest thing is the parent's cupboard of alcohol, right? Or it's the student that I have dealing drugs in my school. So like, that's where we just really need to be able to help students understand the why they're behaving this way and be able to help them. And I do think a lot of it is with our brain health issues and what's going on and what we need to do and what we need to work on, and some different strategies.
So what can people in the audience do to help?
You really put me on the spot.
I am. I just think we just got to get our arms wrapped around.
I know. I think we're searching for everything we can. Right now, we're looking at a brain health room for kids to be able to go to. We find out that I need support, I guess, if I call and say, hey, I need support, I just need you to support me. Because there are times that I just randomly call people in the city and I'm like, hey, I need help with this, and they help us out. But what we find out is we have support systems. If you think about a tier system of support, triangle, very top, level 3, middle, level 2, bottom, level 1. So my level 1 is everybody, all my students in my school. My level 2 are kids who probably need those counseling during the days, that kind of thing that's going on. Level 3, I have a TLC room that's really for my highest kids in needs who have come out of a recovery, come out of rehab, come out of like any kind of thing. They're my tier 3 kids. I'm finding I don't have anything for tier 1. And so we're really looking at right now, and we're trying to work with district office on a brain health room so that any child of mine can walk into this and take a 15-minute break. It could be for, and the thing about this room is that it could be for the athlete that might have a game that night who's totally stressed out and needs quiet time, right? Or it could be for that person who might have been yelled at all the night before and needs that safe space to go, right? And that room has actually been very successful in another few school districts. Bonnie brought me to them. And they have stations where those kids go, and they have a certified counselor. And so that's what I'm trying to work on now. But I think it's constantly like trying to meet the needs of our kids. And if we reach out, please help. That's really what I like. I don't have a list of what I need, but when I do ask, it's only because I've done the research behind and I know what my school needs to be able to help my students.
Thanks.
Yep.
They're probably better to answer, but we're pretty good at normalizing poor behavior, I think, and I think that's a problem. Not to call out the university, but we have a problem 6 or 7 Saturdays where we make the overconsumption of alcohol something to be proud of, and it's not. It is terrible behavior, and we should do something to stop that. And so we got to quit normalizing that kind of behavior and saying it's okay to get incredibly intoxicated and do something stupid and maybe something you'll regret the rest of your life. Maybe we got to normalize that that's not really the best way to have fun instead. So that's what I would offer, at least at this point.
And I will say, briefly touching on that, one of the things we have been working on, and there was actually, and that the city was a great partner in, is we did an event called Cyclone Welcome Weekend, which was intended specifically to address some of that energy that goes into the drinking culture during certain times. We're looking at some options of expanding substance-free alternatives to try and channel energy, because you can't just tell a lot of them, hey, don't be excited, don't be happy to be here at college, but how can you do it in a way that keeps you safe? As for what people here could do, everyone in this room has a tool they can use immediately. And it's cheap and it's free and you all have it, and it's language. How you talk about addiction is very, very easy to do. It's very simple. There are words that I think we all hear. You don't need to have any kind of training to, if I tell you, hey, that person, and I'm going to use, I'm going to use a person that doesn't exist in the room and say that person's a junkie. You already can infer how I feel about that person. I don't respect them. I don't feel positive about them. I don't really care about them based on the way I'm talking about them. If I say that's a person who shared their recovery story with me, I'm showing a lot more respect for that person. I'm talking a lot more about what they've gone through. That's a person with lived experience of addiction. That's a person, potentially going, experiencing, a potentially problematic substance use versus saying I don't even go through all of them, but there's so many different things. They just use the substance and the word head. They'll say pothead or crackhead. These are really negative terms, and a lot of times we don't think about, because oftentimes, well, they're criminals, they're bad people. That's a lot of times what goes into our heads. And when people hear those terms, and usually when people who work in the recovery field hear people using terms like that, they automatically know the person that's saying them is probably not an ally, not someone they can go to for support, not a person they would feel comfortable sharing if they, and sometimes it could be their own family members. Hey, I wanted to share with my family member that I was, struggling to control my drinking, but I know how they talk about those stupid drunks, and they'll use terms like that. And you know what? That's not a safe person to me to share with. And if I don't have people to share with, I don't have an adult or someone to connect with, I'm less likely to get into recovery. People are ready for recovery in certain times, and certain times they're not. But when they're ready for it, if they can find support, if they can get connected to resources, if they can feel like they'll be supported and welcomed, that can really make a difference. So just changing the way you talk about it is a really simple but really powerful thing that I think everyone can do. There's a lot of terms out there. Most times you don't have to be told that's a bad term. Most people hear someone say, even the term substance abuser, that person's a substance abuser is a really, no one who wants to be labeled an abuser in any context. That's, so that person's a person with a substance use disorder. That's a lot different. And it telegraphs to the person how we feel about them, the way we talk about them. So that's a very simple thing. Everyone can do it. There's a number of resources out there about it. I think I remember one off the top of my head. It came in a cool little bookmark form. It was called a dictionary, and it had some great terms and some alternatives to use. But for the most part, I mean, you don't need to go through the whole list of them to know that there's terms out there that kind of show that you don't care about that person. And showing you care and showing support is really critical, especially for people who are living with addiction. So.
Ryan kind of stole a little two of my three things I was going to say, but
Sorry about that.
one was just to expand on that a little bit. My two kids, when they come home, if they talk about that kid that looked weird or that kid was, that drunk kid or like from school or whatever, how are we having those conversations with our kids at that moment, right? Are we kind of echoing like, haha, that's stupid, or like, are we being like that? Or are we redirecting that conversation and making it and having a positive conversation from that? And that's a really practical way. I think too, it's language on social media, right? What do you see stuff on social media? You see articles, or you follow the police scanner or whatever, and you're criticizing on there. What are you doing in there? Are you being a part of the problem, or are you trying to be help? The other thing is be a mentor. YSS needs mentors all the time. We have a mentor department, mentor and volunteer department, especially for kids. We have a ton of kids who are not in treatment. Some are in treatment, some are in shelter, some are just out in the community who need mentors. And it doesn't take a lot of your time, an hour every 2 weeks or something like that, just to spend with a kid really makes a difference. So.
Okay, so I would echo what these gentlemen just said. A lot of times we have normalized that language, saying that a person is clean or dirty. They're not clean or dirty. They're either not using substances at the time, or they are in a substance use disorder and having maybe an episode or, something similar to that. And I really love that Ryan brought up the ad dictionary, because that is great. Go to that, addictionary.com. So that will give you a lot of different things that you can learn. I would say making sure that we're using that person first language is super important. It can turn a person to either participate more or engage more in their treatment, or it can turn that person away from treatment. The other thing that I would say is utilize the drug disposal boxes. If you do not need that medication, get rid of it in the proper way. Take it to one of the locations. We also have drug disposal or drug deactivation bags. So if you've ever been to one of our trainings, you usually get one of those. But that's just a little simpler way to take care of it at home. You put the medication in there, you put warm water in there, leave it for a little bit, zip it up, and you can shake it and throw it away in the garbage. Do not ever put your medication down the toilet. Please, please take it to a drop box.
I think Tasha brought up this. It doesn't cost anything to be kind. And I think kindness matters, but I think it's unconditional kindness, because we show kindness to the person who might have fallen on the street and broken their arm, but we don't show kindness to the person who is in a drunk stupor walking down the sidewalk, because that's a judgment, right? And I think when I talk to my students, I'm always telling them you matter. And I think people really need to understand that people matter, and it needs to be a non-judgmental kindness.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to, I'm just going to give you a quick plug for our next mental health conversation, and then we'll let Tasha show her, we'll formally close the time, but then if you want to stick around and watch the video, which I'm planning on doing to get to know your daughter better. But I was going to ask this question, but we're out of time. But I have to believe that the way kids talk to each other and bullying plays a part. So my plug is we're going to have a phenomenal speaker on April 4th. His name is Scott Radiker. He works for the Bob and Billy Ray Center on Drake campus. And if you know of Character Counts program, they own the worldwide rights to that. Governor Ray was a big proponent of treating people with respect, dignity, operating with integrity. And I hope you all come, but be prepared. He said it's going to be an interactive. It's not going to be just someone talking. He's the only one who'll be talking, but he has actually exercises we'll be doing as a group and individually to practice, take away things so when you leave. But the whole thing is, I think we all hear it, we all know it. We're becoming uncivil in conversation, whether it's online, whether it's in face to face. And I think that's something that, will play a part in our mental health as well, too. So that is April 4th, same place, same time, 6:30 to 8:30. And all I'll share is when he has spoken, I can't take notes fast enough because of all the great takeaways. So please, let your friends know, let your family know, come, let's pack this place. I think it's going to be, and he's also a lot of fun to talk to. He's very energetic, unlike me. I'd probably say, oh God, shut up, would you? But anyway, the point is he's very energetic, and you're just going to have a blast. And he's become a good friend, one who really cares about it. And he does a lot of consulting, believe it or not, with legislatures to try and help them work together. So anyway, with that, if you have to take off, thank you for coming. If you want to chat with somebody, you're welcome to do so. But we're going to go ahead. How long is your video? Oh, 3 minutes. Oh, you all have to stay. You got to watch the video. Then you can talk.